Hey, what's up, everyone? You are not going to want to miss today's show. My guest grew up in a trailer park, left home when she was 14, put herself through university, and went on to become a self-made multi-millionaire. And in this episode, she's going to be raw and real and tell you how she made the money, how she lost the money, how she made the money, how she lost the money, how she made it, kept it, and is spending her life teaching others to do the same. So Krisstina Wise is coming up on the Susan Sly Project.
Welcome to the Susan Sly Project, where entrepreneurs rule, startups launch, and the side hustle becomes the main hustle. Ladies and gentlemen, your host, Susan Sly.
So the question for you, what would you do if you grew up in a really small town where your career path was not looking so good and everyone around you seemed to be underperforming? Would you kind of go with it? Would you make excuses? Would you perhaps allow your surroundings to dictate your success? Well, my guest today didn't do that. And in fact, she left that town, went on to become a self-made multi-millionaire. And in fact, she's been featured in USA Today. She's been recognized by Apple and Evernote for her creative leadership in emerging technologies. And check it out. She's made her life's work, not just to master money, but to teach other people to do the same. I have to say, I'm a little bit excited. I'm holding back for those of you who know me. In addition to that, she's the equivalent of at least 2 PhDs of intense study with some of the business world's most sage and seasoned mentors. Her training experience has built proven systems that work in both good and challenging times. After nearly losing her life in 2013, one of many things we have in common, and spending almost $500,000 to recover, her mission is to now inspire others to build extraordinary wealth and optimal health. So with that, Krisstina Wise, welcome to the Susan Sly Project. I'm so excited to have you here.
Oh, I'm so excited to have this conversation. Thank you.
Okay, prior to starting the show, and what's up, everyone? I think we're in 125 countries. I don't know. They tell me every week. I don't even know. So wherever you are, welcome, welcome, welcome. We were, just before we went into the show, we were talking about the fact that you grew up about 90 minutes from where I live, and a very humble beginning in a town with not even a traffic light. And there are people listening right now who are in Africa, they're in the Philippines, they're in India. They're saying, that sounds like the life I'm living. There's not a lot of prospects here. Tell us about that journey. When did you decide that that wasn't going to be your life? And how did you transition out of there?
Wow, what a big question. Yeah, I mean, my beginning started in a trailer home, and it wasn't even like a double wide. This was a travel trailer on the back of somebody else's land that we were able to, I don't know, my parents somehow were able to put the little trailer on there. And so very humble beginning. And, even a beginning, some alcoholism, just a dysfunctional background. And, there was certainly good in there. I don't want to make it sound like it was just bad. But the small town mentality, small town gossip, I never quite fit in. I was the one that actually was, because we were kind of poor and other things, I was the kind of subject or object of a lot of teasing and high water Krisstina, or wow, because our clothes were always hand-me-downs. And so, as a kid, I just this constant wanting to fit in and be liked and be included, but I wasn't. And just throughout that entire experience, I just say it just never really, I just wanted something more, and I didn't know what that meant. And, since it was such a small town also, I wasn't exposed to any what's possible. I didn't have any examples of how you can turn this little life into a big life. So I don't know what it was. I think it just came from, I was just so dissatisfied and unhappy, and just wanted out, and my parents left at a young age, and so I really figured out my way by the time I was 14, and lived on my own and made my own way and figured out how to make money. So a lot of it, I think, was survival, while at the same time having this innate desire that there has to be something more than this. So I don't know where that came from, but that fire was always burning, and I always wanted to do something or be something. And I think maybe it was that ultimately just, pulled me. And then I think the other piece to that, like looking back, I haven't thought about this. It's such an interesting question, but there was also just this desire to want to want something, and then combined with being scared to death on one hand, but when we're in these places where when you know how to survive, you really can do anything, like, because you make things happen. And I think it was that type of resiliency combined with desire, combined with this belief that I could do something more without knowing what that meant. So I think it's just conquering that fear and just going into these unknown futures that were super scary, but not letting that fear stop me, and just getting past it, just going towards something that must be out there somewhere.
That's so beautiful, because I'm thinking about, we have, I'm very proud that I don't have an explicit rating on iTunes, but I'm thinking about a lot of people will listen to the show with their kids. And I'm thinking about the kid listening to this right now going, I know there's something more for me. And the difference between the knowing and the acting on it. You acted on it. I left home when I was 15, right? So I get it. It's that sense of there's something more for me, and being courageous and taking the first step. What were your first steps? I mean, living on your own at a very early age, but what did you do first to begin to shift the reality? Because that shift started here and here in your head and your heart, but then how did you take action?
I mean, again, I think we're learning more and more to get out of our head. I can be very heady, very left brain, analytical, logical. So that certainly ruled me for a good portion of my life. And then, I'm working on the other side now to be focused more on my intuition and making decisions there and coming more out of heart versus head. But I think at that young age, a lot of it was following that intuition, in the sense of just going where, what that calling was, because my head didn't know enough. The small podunk town that I grew in, it was a poor education. When I finally got to college and I was in these social circles, I mean, people would say, did you grow up in a bread box? I was so naive and so ignorant. I knew nothing. And it's just, I even still reflect back on how little I knew about life. But again, just that desire. And then also in that part of that intuition, I remember like in high school, there are all these trade schools, and because I didn't know what college was. Not only was I the first person in my family to go to college, like nobody talked about college. It wasn't even in the repertoire of what was possible for our family. I mean, that's what we grew up in. But these trade school ideas would come to our high school, but I'd be like, that just doesn't feel right. But I didn't know what else was possible. And then, I did well in school. That was part of what I did, is like, if I can get A's and do well at school, maybe that's my way out, And it really was, because I ended up getting scholarships to a few different scholarships. And then when I got to visit a campus, I visited just Arizona campuses where I grew up. And one was in Flagstaff, Arizona, and one was in Phoenix or Tempe, Arizona, and one was in Tucson, Arizona. And so I got this opportunity to go visit these schools, because these schools were trying to get me because I was straight A 4.0 student. And so it was that when I visited the campuses, it was that experience, that exposure. I'm like, this is what's possible. This is what I can do. And that, it just touched me. And that was it. So it was creating, I guess, that opportunity just through grades at the time that it exposed me to this new possibility. And that was that. Then I, got myself into college and went through that experience. But so I think as all those things combined, but I still wonder, I could have, you and I talked about this, like how I didn't wind up stuck in the town pregnant at a young age, and maybe, not working, flipping burgers. I really don't know how I, didn't end up there, because I could have, but it was all those other things, I think, that combined that with the luck of being exposed to this different possibility, that kind of changed everything for me and sent me on, the track that brought me ultimately where I am today.
It's so interesting you say about like trusting your intuition, right? Because even though there's an aspect of wealth creation that is systematic, right? We're going to do things that are going to make money. We're going to take that money and we're going to invest the money and we're going to make more money. I was just talking to my husband about this yesterday. When I was on this business trip, I brought the book. It's called Homeless to Billionaire, and it's by Andreas Pira. And so he's talking about the emotional side of attracting wealth. And a lot of people don't talk about that, right? There's this aspect of the heart space, as you said, where we are trusting, because people would look at you, or they might look at me and say, we've taken a lot of risks as women and as entrepreneurs. I think it's more risky to stay with the small town mentality of this is all there is for me. To me, that terrifies me more than taking risks. Now, you go off to Arizona State. So I'm a proud Arizona State parent. My daughter graduated WP Carey School of Business. And then how did you start your career after that? Because I'm sure during college, a lot of that naivete you had from Camp Verde got washed away. You're seeing this big world. What was your first career?
Well, my first career, even before that, I think it's something that's important for the broad audience that you have, is that in college, I was certainly motivated by grades because it got me where, because I was on that track thinking, okay, now I need to get good grades to get the job and get the next thing, kind of that linear path that we're all kind of told to follow. But what really set me up differently in college even was I had this yearning for mentorship. I had this yearning for those that knew more than I did to learn from them. So it wasn't so much academic and the book knowledge, which, I did okay in college as well and got an accounting and double major in accounting and finance because I want to learn this money thing. So I grew up without it and thought that was the way. But the best thing that came out, again, just this exposure and getting in the minds of people that were doing things or could think the way that I wanted to think. And I developed some really good relationships in college with professors that really shaped me and helped grow like just the way I saw things, and of course I went up to ask and they ended up, I had kind of a handful, I'd say 3 that ended up just being such a big part of that, again, from the small mentality to expose myself to bigger mentalities and experiences that, again, I could see what was possible. So I just share that because, so much we spend so much time alone or reading books or doing these things, and just the mentorship or that piece is such an important. And when with those that actually want to teach and help others, they aspire, they want the younger or those that actually have this desire, ambition to do something with their life. They want to help and be part of that growth. So I think that was a big part. That my first job out of college was actually with the Big Six. At the time, it's a Big 8 accounting firm, because that's what I thought was I should do. Went to college, I got an accounting degree. I should sit for my CPA and I should go work for this firm. And because I did well in college, I got offered a job out of college in Phoenix, actually. But I worked there for like 3 months and I hated it. I hated it. I just again, I just kind of was this free spirit at that point. And I quit. I quit this job, and everybody's like, "What are you talking about? Like, why would you quit this great job?" And I actually moved to Aspen, Colorado, and waited tables and concierge and skied and again, following this intuition. I was just like, I don't want to follow this plan. I don't want to do what everybody else is doing. I'm kind of now in the same thing of this mentality of what everybody else is doing or tells me I should be doing. And so I just took off, and that ended up being this great experience. And then from there, I moved to Costa Rica to learn Spanish and to expose myself to the world because, again, I've been 2 places, Camp Verde, Arizona, and pretty much Tempe, So I had another mentor that said, Krisstina, go learn through other cultures, or go learn, like, get out, go spread your wings. You have entire life to go get a job and get, figure out how to work and like make money. So again, I just say exposure. And then I just keep teaming up with people that knew more than I did. And so in all my success, I'm a hard worker, I'm a type A, I'm, kind of one of those overachievers so much in my life, just like you, ran marathons, did triathlon, and worked 5 jobs and raised children and just, and. But it was, in all of that hard work and resiliency and, crises and breakdowns and nearly losing my life. And I mean, I've made every mistake known to man. Lots of traumas in there, just that, so many of us have experienced traumas. There's been these enormous traumas that nobody should have to go through. But despite all of that, it was just this constant desire that I could always be better and I could learn. and this desire, and always this teaming up with mentors. It was the mentors. It was those like people that I really put myself in their environment and asked, like, I'll empty your trash cans if you'll spend time with me, and whatever I can do, So it's like that exposure and the mentorship and being on the shoulders of giants, that book, for example, of the again, it was just wherever I got, being with a mentor, exposed to this next level of thinking, different type of mindset, different, beliefs of what was possible. It's like, oh, okay, now I can see that possibility. I couldn't have seen it on my own, but that I was exposed to that through these different mentors and teachers in my life. That's always what's kind of carried me to that next stage or the next place, by being able to see possibility. So when we get stuck, it's because we get stuck because we don't see any more possibility than what we're in right now. And then kind of having that courage is like, well, I don't know. And getting over that self-talk, like, who am I? Or I'm just this small town person that knows nothing. Like, why could I be successful? Getting beyond those stories we tell ourselves and just doing it anyway. And going, if I fail, I fail, but I don't want to stay here,
Yeah.
So, that combination of mentors and teachers, and always searching for that, and getting close to that, while at the same time just having the courage to just jump into that next thing that was really scary.
I love that you mentioned that about being just this hunger for knowledge and this hunger for what else is there. And I was it's so funny we're having this conversation because our mutual friend, Mitzi Purdue, when I was talking to her earlier, I said, Mitzi, where does it come from? I mean, the woman's doing a master's degree in computer science in 1965, before women were doing master's degrees in computer science. And she said to me, Krisstina, I have to take a course every year. I have to learn. There's, that it's this hunger for knowledge. And I love that about you, that whether it's mentors or it's courses, it's this learning. And I'm the exact same way. My most recent course was cybersecurity at MIT. My next one is going to be economics. And it doesn't matter to me whether it's learning how to change a carburetor, or it's coding, or it's whatever it is. I feel like if I'm not learning, I'm not growing. And this year I challenged myself to read 2 books per month, because I know in my biggest revenue years, that's what I was reading. So let me ask you this, because there's so many things I want to ask you for everyone listening. As you were hungry for this mentorship, and I know you've read a lot of books, attended seminars, different things. What would you say are some of the top, whether it's books or teachers, that really helped you shift your thinking around money?
Yeah, well, one of my college professors, right before I was graduating college, he was one of my mentors, and his name was Chris Neck, of all things. I'm just remembering this. And he was, again, I became friends with him, and he sent me with this book. It's called The Peaceful Warrior. And in that, I still have it. I think I gave it to my son and it finally fell apart. I don't have it anymore. But the last time I really read through that book and read what he wrote to me, that I hadn't even remembered he had written that to me for like 15 years or 20 years before. He said, Krisstina, you are a peaceful warrior. Go live life as this peaceful warrior. So it's reflecting back on this, like, wow, he saw that peaceful warrior in me. So that book was this first book, like out of college, that exposed me to this whole different way of living life outside of the norm. And I think that's a big piece, is that falling into the status quo norm and getting kind of comfortable in that is what robs us of our potential and what we're here to do. And again, because it gets comfortable, it gets fearful. Like, what if I do something different and I lose this? But that was such a great starting place. And then, of course, there's always the timeless books. Atlas Shrugged really changed or reshaped my thinking. Think and Grow Rich really reshaped my thinking, or expanded, I guess, kept expanding. So it's those timeless books. The Greatest Salesman in the World is a must read, but all this is just based on ancient wisdom. And it's the ancient wisdom that's really and I call it, it's the opposite of conventional wisdom, the wisdom that's handed to us, the programming that's handed to us. So there's all these books. I was just devouring books at this age. And again, is this heart expansion of, whoa, really? You can do this and this possible in this way of thinking. But also at the same time, I'd say it wasn't easy, because it was so outside of the normal way of being and thinking that, there was that Apple commercial. I resonated with Apple because it was for, some of the commercials at the time were apples for all the misfits of the world, all those that don't fit in. And so much of my life was that wanting to fit in, but realized I never quite, trying to push myself to fit, and just always being on a little bit of the outside. And finally, I just came to terms with that, because all these authors that I read were outside of the norm, and I just resonated and fit, and like, okay, I just have to go create my own way. I can't care so much about what everybody else thinks. I'm going to stop trying to fit in and just go do my own path. But I realized after I lost, I didn't lose it. I actually quit that first job. I just wasn't meant for a job either. I wanted to do my own thing. I wanted to forge my own path and just continue to grow, to see at any stage of life what I was capable of. So it's always that self-challenge, that you have. And again, I love the word when you use hunger. It's just a hunger to learn, and it's not, I have a hunger, the learning, the desire, the hunger for knowledge and to learn isn't just to learn. It's just to be able to experience more life through knowing more than I know now, because the more we know, every time we learn something new, it expands what we can do. It expands who we are. It expands what we see, because we can only see with what we know. And so when we quit learning, we can't see and we can't create any more than what we've already created. So it's that next stage of unknowing, and then that turns into knowing, that opens up everything that's new. And as long as we can see possibility, we can move towards possibilities. When we can't see possibility, which is where things, start to stagnate, or we just kind of lose that fire. So that just became my entrepreneurial journey. I've been an entrepreneur and business. I've never had a consistent paycheck in my life, and
except for 3 months at the accounting.
For 3 months, right? Yeah, the 3 consistent paychecks were nice. But again, it wasn't about the money either. I mean, that it was like I gave up the great paying job because I just wanted to create more possibility for myself than stuck in that dungeon and doing what I was told to do and just putting hours and hours and hours. It just didn't make sense. It's like, this is not the life I signed up for. I didn't escape the little town just to do this.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think there's an aspect of, once you say, we were talking, you're not looking in the rear view mirror anymore. Once you leave that town, there's still that temptation at times for that small town girl to question, but at the same point, I love what you said. We can only see with what we know. So let me ask you this. How did you make your first $1 million?
Oh, a lot of effing hard work is what that was. But I made my first $1 million and I lost my first $1 million. So I made my first $5 million and I lost my second $5 million, because even though, what I didn't know at the time is I was really great at making money, because I really didn't have my mindset, because I'd been exposed to multimillionaires that I'd studied under. I knew, and I was learning from them. I didn't have any limited mindset, like I couldn't create it. So that was the first piece. I think when we have those limited mindsets that we're only capable of something, that, that again, it puts a ceiling on things. So I didn't have that. I was really great at making money. I always expected that I could and I would. But at that, I didn't know how to keep it. I didn't know that some of these other, financial laws, principles, and even these spiritual aspects of money. And a lot of it is, I think, deep down, I believe this to be true now after I've done so much work, but I didn't believe I deserved it. So even though I was great at making it, because I didn't have any limited mindsets of how much money I could make, deep down, I didn't feel like I deserved it. I was still that poor girl that didn't deserve to have this money. And so I was just really good at losing it. So, I made my first $1 million by the time I was 30. But yeah, I went on to have a net worth of 10 million and lost most of that. I had to start over again. But all of it was a great journey, and all of it's really brought me to what I do now, which is to teach money from this way of, it's just a radically different approach to understand money. when money is not about the chase, it's not about what we buy or our status or how we compare, and it just becomes a soulful journey of possibility, it really changes our relationship with it. And then, getting over the shame, getting over the guilt, getting over these childhood beliefs. Money was always conflict in our family. They argued about money all the time. I mean, we had to move out, we had to move to bad places because we didn't have the money. Parents got divorced because of this money. So I had lots of trauma and lots of issues and lots of programming and a lot of beliefs around money is not something, my family has. So, a lot of cleanup that turned into that, and a lot of lessons. And, now I'm good at making it and keeping it, and, created a place of financial independence, which is nice. And I love talking to women about this too, because I'm a single female, and I've built this, I've lost it. Like I said, I've built it again. A big portion of my losing it was being in dysfunctional relationships, I would say, that kind of mirrored some of my growing up. Because if we don't clean up our childhood, we'll repeat it. And I was completely repeating my childhood patterns, despite all this great stuff I was doing at the same time. I was self-sabotaging and kind of destructing as much. So I was kind of doing all this great stuff on one side, and then the other side is kind of sabotaging everything. So it's just this constant tension and constant struggle and constant hardship. And I was creating that for myself. So yeah, a lot of that was just cleaning up the baggage from, my childhood. And we have money baggage, just like we have any other baggage that we bring up, especially like you and I and others that come from, more difficult beginnings. It's great. I think you resonate with this, that I believe I can survive almost anything. Nothing's going to keep me down for long because I've come out of the ashes so many times. But also I create a lot of hardships for myself unconsciously, without, that I didn't need to create for myself. I think I was in a mindset that life had to be a struggle to succeed, or, whatever the case is. So yeah, just, when everything became easy, easy in relative terms, of course, is when I let go of, I cleaned up all that old shit that was underneath that, like I said, was destroying everything I was creating.
Yeah. I so get that. I made, like you, I made my first million in my 20s. I was a millionaire, and then I lost it. And then, I could make money, and I was just a manifestation, it was just so easy. And then when I sat back and I said, why am I doing this? And you can make money for the wrong reasons, and you won't keep it for the right reasons, if that makes sense. And that was me. And so I really had to clean up not just the obvious things that were there, the obvious baggage, but the stuff I didn't even realize that was there, the proving, the feeling, of belonging. And that's why, I love what you're doing. And I was on your website, and we're going to send everyone there because there's some amazing resources there. But super quick, I want to just, final question. If someone is listening right now and they're going, oh my gosh, I resonate with this so much. I get money and then the money is gone. What would you say is the first most important step they could take? Because one of the things I always want to give the listeners is something tangible that they could go, I can do that right now. What would that first thing be?
Yeah, there's what I found in my work today is that there's these different, we're kind of sit in one of these different camps. One camp, like we've talked about, is that just can't make enough money, so that's one thing. And so it's getting the source of what is the beliefs and mindsets that are these limiting beliefs or mindsets or stories that keeps us from being able to really grow into our potential, because money's easy to make. Money's really easy to make. We can attract it, pull it in by being creators and innovators and workers, like whatever we do. So it's available to everyone. Money's not limited. It's truly abundant. So there's always something underneath that the work is underneath. Like, what's the source of those beliefs? And so that would be the place, like if we're in the camp of just so much struggle, no matter how hard we work or how many hours we put in, we just can't make enough money. There's there's beliefs and story underneath that. So it's just getting to the bottom of that. Then, I'm not good enough, or I'm not smart enough, or, if I make a lot of money, what will my friends and parents think, because when we feel like, we're naturally as humans, we need this sense of belonging. We want to fit in. If there's something underneath that thinks we might be outcast or something by virtue of making money, then we'll keep ourselves in these situations. The other camp is, are those like us that are great at making it, but don't know how to keep it. And usually underneath that is some belief like, I don't deserve it, I'm not good enough, what will others think? It just kind of goes back to these core things. So again, one first step is just to look underneath, like, what is that? The second piece is what I call the skill set of money, is that what's obvious about money is what actually sabotages us with money, because the obvious part of money is we make it and we spend it. But there's actually, like with anything else, there's a skill. Money has laws and principles that we have to follow. Like nature has laws and principles. We use the example gravity that, why do we not let our 3-year-olds walk alone on a, 30-story building that has no railing? They don't have the knowledge of not going off, right? They don't understand. They've not learned yet that there's this thing called gravity. And if you go off the side of a 30-story building, you're, squash. So money has these invisible principles as well. And so any aspect, if money's not working for us in life, it's one, looking at what are those underlying beliefs. And also, what do I not know about money? Like when you go learn about a carburetor, if you don't know, you can't do anything a carburetor. You don't know what a carburetor is. Maybe you can look at it and say, I think that's it. But everything in life has these knowledge aspects to it. And so with that, what I'd say is just go learn about money. That just read some books, start learning and start applying, because money's a life skill. It affects every part of our life. And so I just claim that if there's truth, that it is a life skill, that meaning we have to know things and do things to be able to create the wealth that we want. And wealth is different than income. Many of us, we make our income, but we know nothing about wealth. And wealth is totally different. Wealth creation is a totally different game and strategy. It's like, I want to be wealthy. And then the next place is, okay, how? What do I need to go learn to do it? And again, there's no shortage of books. There's no shortage of people. There's no shortage of podcasts. There's an abundance of people that have done it, to learn from.
Well, Krisstina, thank you so much for that. And so what I'm hearing is, firstly, you gotta go deep, because if you keep on doing the same thing you're doing, you're going to get the same result. And then, start reading the books, don't avoid them, listen to the podcasts. Is a lot of people with podcasts, they gravitate toward the salacious entertainment or the mysteries or whatever. Is that going to make your life better? Probably not. If you're not learning, you're not growing. If you're not growing, you're not growing your money, and you're not going to keep it. Right. So Krisstina,
we get back to the hunger too, like a hunger for wealth, but there's this feeling that's like, oh, hunger for wealth, that's a bad thing. Oops, right there's a sign, right? Because if it's hunger for wealth is a good thing, then we are allowed to have that hunger. And then that's going to drive us, but have a hunger. And then, the final piece to that too is our relationships, our relationship with money. My book, Falling for Money, is all about the relationship piece, is understanding. Even though I had millions, I had a very unhealthy relationship with money for most of my life. And I nearly had to die. I'm not kidding you. Like my lifestyle, and because what nearly killed me was my pursuit of more. And it was more in every aspect of my life, because I was so dissatisfied. I didn't know what satisfaction was. I had to push myself harder and harder and harder again on all this childhood stuff, the kind of this need to prove myself, or say, hey, look at me, look at me, look at me, which are these inside stories that I didn't know were present. It sounds like you went through something similar, but I was always in the chase. I was always in the push. It was like this velocity, like I had to run a race as fast as I could all the time. And it just took me out. And the big lesson there was my pursuit of money and more, because I never felt good enough, no matter where I was. And I couldn't be satisfied with anything. That it's like happiness or something must be at the next rung. So no matter how successful I got, no matter how much money I had, it just never was good enough. So getting to a place of good enough and satisfaction became a big part of the spiritual journey. But when I was dying, so much of my life had been in that pursuit and that chase that I missed my life. And so then now I'm standing in a place where I'm just stuck with remorse and grief and guilt and sadness, darkness, such dark sadness and grief. The remorse was like overwhelming, like, oh my God. And it just became so obvious that my whole life was this chase of more, and I missed life. I wasn't slowing down to enjoy or be grateful or just spend time with the accomplishments and the things that I did. And so I had to really let go. I had to grow. I mean, I had to do the work to get out of that not good enough narrative that drove me my whole life, that need to prove myself, because where I started from, I didn't get any attention. I didn't fit in. So that's what I was trying to do in adulthood. And then, money just really, it just never became about the pursuit anymore. It just became about knowing these numbers and knowing what I could do and just enjoying it and being grateful for what I had versus always dissatisfied with what I didn't have. And so that was a big tipping point for me.
Well, Krisstina, I want to commend you, number one, for the proof positive you are, because every person out there needs their version of Roger Bannister. And if someone is, listening, watching, if Krisstina did it, you can do it too. That's one. Number two is go get Kristina's book, Falling for Money, on Amazon, bestseller. Go get the book, and then connect with Krisstina on sovereigntyacademy.com. And I love your resources that you have there, as I mentioned. And Krisstina, thank you so much for being here. And go ahead, drop a comment below. If you're watching on YouTube, I'm the one who responds to all your comments. So don't forget to hit subscribe, and I will connect with you. Or whatever platform you're on. If you're on iTunes, Spotify, we would love a 5-star review. Connect with Krisstina and I on social. Give us the shout out. What are you taking away? And Krisstina, what's your preferred shout out? If someone wants to say, oh my gosh, I so get that. Or, if they have a question for you, which social do you prefer?
I prefer Instagram, at Krisstina Wise on Insta.
Okay, at Krisstina Wise on Insta. So with that, everyone, thank you so much for being here. And on behalf of Krisstina and I hope you got a lot of goodness out of this, because I know I did. And with that, this has been another episode of the Susan Sly Project.